Okay, now that we have covered the overview, let's dive into verse by verse exposition. Verse 1, an oracle concerning Damascus. Behold, Damascus will cease to be a city and will become a heap of ruins. The cities of Aroer are deserted. They will be for flocks, which will lie down, and none will make them afraid. Let's pause here. Oracle concerning Damascus. When did Damascus fall? It fell in about 732. So if you want to make it easy to remember, 722 is when Samaria fell, the northern kingdom. And Damascus fell 10 years earlier, so 732. And why do I mention this? Because it's not terribly important, but it is sort of important. If you backtrack to chapter 14, 29 or 28, we have this oracle concerning Philistia, the Philistines. And it begins by saying that in the year that King Ahaz died, came this oracle. King Ahaz died in 715 BC. My whole point is the chapter we are reading happened before chapter 14. In other words, these chapters are not arranged in a chronological order. Chapter 17, oracle was given to Isaiah and pronounced before he pronounced chapter 14. Because chapter 14 says this oracle was given in 715 BC. But this one we know happened before 732 BC because it's talking about the destruction of Damascus, which will happen in 732 BC. And hence the prophecy must have happened before 732 BC. Clear? This is important because if this is not arranged chronologically, as readers, as critical and careful readers of the Bible, we need to ask ourselves, why did Isaiah arrange these chapters in the way that he did? Why not put it in chronological order? That's just such a logical way to organize things, but he doesn't. Then what is his intention? Okay, these are the kind of questions you guys should be asking yourself if you want to be better and more careful readers of the Word. And the long story short, go and watch the overview video for chapters 13 through 27, which talks about that beautiful chart that I told you about. But long story short, Isaiah, for some reason, is putting Israel in the fourth row of the outline graph, our outline chart about chapters 13 through 27. Putting Israel in the midst of the nations. And once again, remember, all the four countries that surround Israel are like one on the north, one on the west, one on the east, and one on the south. Okay? Isaiah intentionally is putting Israel in the middle of these nations to put the connection between the salvation of Israel and the salvation of the Gentiles, which go hand in hand. All right. So, oracle concerning Damascus happened sometime before 732, and nobody knows where Aroer is in that area. There are several Aroers that we have spotted, but not in that area. But the point is, they're going to get destroyed pretty badly. All right? Let's move on to verse 3. The fortress will disappear from Ephraim, and the kingdom from Damascus. And the remnant of Syria will be like the glory of the children of Israel, declares the Lord of hosts. This is very important. The fortress will disappear from Ephraim. Okay? Ephraim is northern kingdom. We suddenly, in the midst of oracle concerning Damascus, we have something about Ephraim. Fortress will disappear from Ephraim and the kingdom from Damascus. So Israel is sharing this judgment probably because Ephraim kind of decided to share their destiny with Damascus by forming an alliance and fighting against Assyria, which they failed to succeed on. Okay? So Ephraim enters the scene here, and Ephraim will be the topic of discussion from this verse and on until verse 11. Okay? Look again, verse 3b, the second half. And the remnant of Syria will be like the glory of the children of Israel, declares the Lord of hosts. This should raise an exclamation mark in your heads. What on earth is this about? And the remnant of Syria. Syria is Damascus, Gentiles, enemy of Judah, will be like the glory of the children of Israel, declares the Lord of hosts. So here, I mean, some people, this is kind of odd, but let's take it at face value. Isaiah here is expressing an unexpected reality of hope. There will be remnant in Syria who is going to be glorious like the children of Israel. Okay? Although Damascus will be destroyed, there will be some remnants of Syria who will be glorious. Okay? So we, again, already have this restoration of this Gentile nation that's coming up from this verse. And verses 4 through 11 are going to talk about Israel, and 12 through the end of chapter 18 is going to talk about these Gentile nations, including but not limited to Damascus. All right, so we went through Roman numeral 1, pronouncement of judgment on Damascus, pronouncement of judgment on Ephraim, and the joint restoration of Syria and Israel. Verse 4, and in that day the glory of Jacob will be brought low, and the fat of his flesh will grow lean. And it shall be, as when the reaper gathers standing grain, and his arm harvests the ears, and as one gleans the ears of grain in the valley of Ephraim. Gleanings will be left in it as when an olive tree is beaten. 2 or 3 berries in the top of the highest bough, 4 or 5 on the branches of a fruit tree, declares the Lord God of Israel. So we're entering into this judgment on Israel. In that day, the glory of Jacob will be brought low. Okay, so we're talking about clearly about Israel, not Damascus. Okay, glory of Jacob will be brought low. And the key point that you need to catch from here is that the gleanings will be left in it, verse 6, 2 or 3 berries in the top of the highest bough. So gleaning, what is gleaning? It's an act of collecting the leftover crops after the commercial harvest. So after you do the main harvest, there's going to be some left here and there in the corners and the stuff. Gleaning, you pick those out. But here it says gleanings will be left in it, 2 or 3 berries in the top of the highest bough. So most of them are going to be taken away. Most of them are going to be destroyed and judged. But there's going to be a few that's going to be left. There's going to be some hope. Okay? So that's what God is saying about the destruction of Ephraim. One more note before we move on. Verse 5 at the end. As when one gleans the ears of grain in the valley of Ephraim. Valley of Ephraim, people have looked for it and have found it to be in the southwest outskirt of Jerusalem. If you know Gilo, it's on the northern foot of Gilo, or more famously known as where the Jerusalem Zoo is. The Jerusalem Zoo and the aquarium, that valley right there is the Valley of Ephraim. It's a lush field with a lot of agricultural remains that have been found, and you can visit there today. En Yael Outdoor Museum, although it's not open year throughout, but check it out. So even the point is, even that such lush field of agriculture will be destroyed. Okay, now verse 7. In that day, man will look to his Maker, and his eyes will look on the Holy One of Israel. He will not look to the altars, the work of his hands, and he will not look on what his own fingers have made, either the Asherim or the altars of incense. What's happening here? So if you have your highlighter, I recommend you to highlight in that day in verse 7, and in that day in verse 4, and in that day in verse 9. These, whenever you have these repeated phrases, it often marks a good dividing line for outlining your text. This second in that day is the return of Israel to God. If you see my outline, it's the middle one. It's the chiastic structure, and the middle one often receives the emphasis, remember? And here we have the return of Israel to God. This is the only positive note, remark in this chapter. Israel is gonna one day, although be destroyed, although there's gonna be a few remnants, one day people are going to look at the Holy One of Israel. However, pay careful attention to verse 7. In that day, man will look to his maker. Who's going to look to his maker? Man. In Hebrew is ha-adam. Okay, Adam, just a man, a general term for man. Ha-adam, a man is going to look to his maker. And notice that Isaiah does not say the Israelites or Jacob or God's chosen nation is going to look to his maker, but a man. Okay? So we might have to ask the question, is this Damascus or Israel? I think it's intentionally left obscure by the prophet to leave the doors open for anyone. In that day, of course, Israel, but the emphasis here that the prophet wants to make is that anybody can and will. Some people, whether Jew or Gentile, they're going to come and fix their eyes on the Holy One of Israel. Okay? Even non-Israelites, may they be, will acknowledge Yahweh as the one true God. Okay? Very important motif in this oracle in chapter 17 and 18. Isaiah, you will see as we go on, intentionally leaves these people who are returning or being restored a little obscure. Same thing with the destroyers that we'll see later. And the Gentile nation that's going to come and worship God in the future, that's also left obscure. Okay? I think it is a little intentional to make it not strictly applied to a certain group of people, but open to many different people. So in that day, man, Ha'adam, will look to his maker, and he will not look to the altars. They're not going to do idolatry anymore. And by the way, before we move on, look at the last bit of verse 8. Either the Asherim or the altars of incense, they will not look unto it. But the question is, altar of incense is a part of the element in the tabernacle and the temple, isn't it? But the Hebrew word here is hamanim, which is not the same word, not even close to the word that is used to refer to the altar of incense that is to be placed in the tabernacle or the temple, which is ketoret. Okay, so it's a very different word. This hamanim, altar of incense, is referring to altars of incense in the temples of Baal or in high places. So in that day, people who worship idols are going to stop worshiping idol and look at the God of Israel. All right, so this is the restoration mark that is coming after the destruction. But in verse 9, we're going to go back to the reality and step away from the ideal and see why they're going to get judged. All right, 17, verse 9. In that day, this is the third in that day, their strong cities will be like the deserted places of the wooded heights and the hilltops, which they deserted because of the children of Israel, and there will be desolation. For you have forgotten the God of your salvation and have not remembered the rock of your refuge. Therefore, though you plant pleasant plants and sow the vine branch of a stranger, though you make them grow on the day that you plant them and make them blossom in the morning that you sow, yet the harvest will flee away in a day of grief and incurable pain. So going back to the reality, and God is pointing out exactly why they're going to destroy it. They're going to be destroyed because of the children of Israel. But what did they do wrong? You have forgotten the God of your salvation. Verse 10. Verse 10. You have forgotten the God of your salvation. Okay, and the punishment is that they're going to work hard, they're going to plant, they're going to sow, but they're not going to reap any fruit or profit from their hard work, which reminds you of Genesis 3, where Adam's labor will not bear as much fruit as it's supposed to as a part of the punishment. In fact, I think here it sounds even worse. But anyway, they're not going to bear fruit, and that's going to be the punishment. Okay, and I wanna wrap up this video by highlighting verse 10. For you have forgotten the God of your salvation. Okay, forgetting is a problem. In fact, the Bible knows about this and puts many tools for us to avoid forgetting God, such as the biblical feasts, right? The Passover is supposed to remind them of the salvation and so on. Even in the New Testament, we have the Lord's Supper, and we're supposed to remember the body and the blood that was sacrificed on our behalf, right? So God implements these reminders because He knows we'll forget. And the enemy will use prosperity, pain, pleasure, etc. Whatever that would make us forget what we should remember. Okay? And are you finding yourself to be in a difficult position today? Has God placed you in a difficult spot? That is one way we're not supposed to forget God. Instead of being cranky in times of difficulty, we must forget Him not. We need to ask God for help to remember Him in the days of trouble. Okay? So if you're finding yourself in a tough spot, please be encouraged and remember the God of your salvation, the salvific work that God has already done in your life. Let that be the strength that carries you today. Blessings.